The man in the doorway was 41 years old, and he had just learned that the woman who raised him was not the woman who gave birth to him. He stood in the back bedroom of a house he had been paying the mortgage on for 9 years, a house he had bought for the only mother he had ever known, and in his hands he held a shoebox that had been taped shut and untaped and retaped so many times the cardboard had gone soft at the corners. Inside were 11 envelopes, each one had a number written on the front in blue ink, in a hand that was careful the way a tired person's writing gets careful when the words matter more than the comfort. He had not opened them yet. He was afraid of them, the way you are afraid of. A stare in the dark, the one you know is there, and step toward anyway. What he did not know, standing there with the dust settling in the late light, was that the woman who had written those letters had been dead for 36 years, and that she had spent the last 2 years of her life writing to a son she was almost certain she would never get to raise. Stay with me, because the thing he found in that box changed not just what he believed about his life, but what he was willing to do with the rest of it. His name was Andre Mills, and on the afternoon this story turns on, he had come back to clean out the house because the woman who lived in it had passed 3 weeks before. Her name was Yolanda, and the town had called her Miss Yo for as long as anyone could remember, and she had been 73 when her heart finally quit on her in the recliner with the television on. The neighbor found her the next morning when the paper sat untouched on the porch, which was not like her. Yolanda had read the paper front to back every day of her life, even the parts she said were a waste of ink because, she told him once, a woman who can read owes it to the women who couldn't to do it every chance she gets. Andre had thought that was just a thing. She said he thought a lot of things she said were just things she said. He had buried her on a Tuesday. He had stood at the front of the church in a suit that was a size tight in the shoulders, and he had read the 23rd Psalm without his voice breaking, his thumb pressing a crease into the edge of the page so hard it tore a little. The church had been full. People he had not seen in 20 years came up to him in the receiving line and held his hand in both of theirs and told him, "Your mama was the finest woman I ever knew," and he had nodded and said thank you and meant it, and not one of them, not a single one, had said anything that gave away what he would learn 3 weeks later. Then he had gone home to his wife and his 2 daughters, and he had not cried, and that worried him more than crying would have. He kept waiting for the grief to arrive the way everyone said it would, in a wave, all at once, the way it had for Tasha when her own mother died, the way it knocked her flat for a week. Instead, it came in small, mean pieces, ambushes. The smell of her kitchen, that mix of coffee and pine sol and something sweet underneath. The way her reading glasses still sat, folded on the arm of the chair, where she would never reach for them again. A voicemail he could not bring himself to delete. 12 seconds of her asking him to pick up cornmeal on his way over, as though she would always be there needing cornmeal, as though there would always be a next visit. The fact that no one in the world would ever again call him baby in exactly the way she had. Low and warm and a little exasperated. "Baby, come here and look at this." He was 41 years old, and he had not known until she was gone how much of him was held up by being someone's baby. The house was small and clean and full of the particular order of a woman who had never owned much and had taken care of all of it. Andre worked through it slowly across that first Saturday, filling boxes, setting aside the things his daughters might want someday. He found her good dishes wrapped in newspaper from 12 years back, the blue-rimmed plates she brought out for Easter and Thanksgiving and nothing else. And he unwrapped one and held it and remembered being 8 years old and being trusted to dry them, the terror and the pride of it. He found the quilt she had made the winter. His knee was in a cast, every square a piece of something, a square of his old church pants, a square of an apron, a square of a shirt he had outgrown at 10, a whole history of him sewn together by her hands in the long evenings while he lay on the couch feeling sorry for himself. He had not known, as a boy, what it meant that a woman would take the scraps of your childhood and stitch them into something to keep you warm. He set the quilt aside for his younger daughter who slept cold. he found in the bottom drawer of her dresser, under a layer of folded slips and a Bible with a cracked spine and a rubber band around it to keep the loose pages in, the shoebox. He almost set it with the giveaway pile without opening it. He had a system by then, a rhythm, keep, give, toss, and the box was light and rattled like it held buttons or thread, or the spare change a person empties from pockets across a lifetime. Something stopped his hand. Maybe the tape, the way it had yellowed and been worried at. Maybe the number of times it had so clearly been opened and closed, the cardboard gone soft, the way only a thing that is handled and handled gets soft. He sat down on the edge of her bed, which still smelled faintly of the lotion she used, cocoa, butter, and lavender, and he worked the tape loose with his thumbnail the way he had loosened 1,000 stubborn things on 1,000 job sites, patient, unhurried, and he lifted the lid. The envelopes were stacked in order, 1 through 11, and on the top of the stack, separate, was a single folded sheet of notebook paper with his name on it. Not Andre. His name was written there as Marcus. He stared at it for a long time. He did not know anyone named Marcus. He turned the paper over and saw nothing on the back and turned it again and read the front, and the second line said, in that same careful blue hand, "For my son, in case I am not there." He set it down on the quilt beside him. His hands had started to shake, and he did not entirely know why. Yet he picked up the first numbered envelope. The number on it was 1. He opened it. What he held was a birthday letter written to a 1-year-old by a mother who did not expect to live to see him turn 2. "I am writing this on the night before you are 1 year old," the letter began, "and I am sitting up because the medicine makes it hard to lie flat. The doctors at the clinic say my heart is bigger than it should be, and getting bigger, and that there is a name for it, and not much they can do about it where we are and with what we have. I want you to know some things in case I cannot tell you myself. I want you to know that you came 3 weeks early and you were so small the nurse could hold you in one hand, and you screamed like you were furious to be here, and I laughed even though it hurt to laugh. I want you to know your father is gone, not dead, just gone, and that is not your fault and it is not mine either. It is just a thing that happened. I want you to know that you are loved past the edge of what I can write down. Happy birthday, my Marcus. I will try so hard to be here next year." The letter was signed, "Your Mama, Renee." Andre read it 3 times. He did not understand it. He understood the words, but not how they had come to be in Yolanda's drawer, written by a woman he had never heard of, addressed to a boy with a different name, a boy who was 1 year old, on a night that, if he did the arithmetic, would have been the year he himself turned 1. He sat very still. Across town his wife was making dinner and his daughters were doing homework at the kitchen table, and the ordinary world was going on the way it always did, and in that small clean bedroom Andre was holding the first piece of a truth that would take him the rest of the year to assemble. He opened the second envelope. This one was written to a 2-year-old, and the hand was a little weaker, and the woman named Renee was apologizing. "I am sorry. I am so tired." "All the time," she wrote. "I am sorry I cannot run after you the way the other mamas do. You learned to walk this month, and you walk straight at things, the wall, the dog, the stove, fearless, and I have to be the one to grab you, and I am not always fast enough, and it scares me. There is a woman from the church who comes and sits with us, Miss Yolanda, and she is good to us and she does not ask for anything. If I am not here, I think she will be. I have started to hope that. Happy birthday, my baby. You are 2 and you are perfect, and I am so proud of how you are growing, even when the growing leaves me behind." There it was, Miss Yolanda. The name landed in Andre's chest like a stone dropped down a well, and he waited for the splash, and when it came he had to put the letter down and breathe. The woman who comes and sits with us. The woman who is good to us and does not ask for anything. He was beginning to understand, and he did not want to, and he kept reading anyway, because some doors, when they open, you cannot make yourself walk back out. The letters went on. 3, 4, 5. Each one was a year. Each one was a birthday. And across them, like a slow tide coming in, Andre watched a young mother grow sicker and braver at the same time. In the third letter, Renee wrote that she had been in the hospital twice that year and that Yolanda had kept Marcus, both times, weeks at a stretch, and had brought him to the hospital window because the ward would not let a child so young inside, and that she had pressed her hand to the glass, and he had pressed his small hand to the other side, and that was the best birthday present she had gotten, that hand against the glass. In the fourth letter, she wrote that the clinic doctor had said the word transplant for the first time and then had said the word money in the same breath, and that had been the end of that conversation. In the fifth letter, she wrote that she had begun to make a plan. The plan was Yolanda. Renee had asked her plainly, sitting at a kitchen table that Andre now realized was the very table he had eaten 10,000 meals at, whether Yolanda would raise Marcus as her own, if it came to that. And Yolanda, who had buried a husband young and had never been able to have children of her own, who had wanted a child her whole life with a wanting she had folded up small and put away, had said yes. She had said more than yes. She had said she would love him so completely that he would never feel the shape of what he had lost. And then Renee wrote she had asked me for one thing in return. She asked me to let her give him her name and her history. She said a boy needs a clean story, not a sad one. She said if he grows up knowing his mama died and his daddy ran, that is a weight he carries every single day, and a child should not have to carry that to school. She said, let me tell him he is mine from the start, and let these letters wait until he is a grown man who can hold them. I did not want to say yes, I wanted my name on him. I am 26 years old, and I am dying though, and she is offering my son a mother and a house and a name that does not ache, and so I said yes, and I am writing these so that one day he will know that the woman who gave him up did not give him away, that I let him go with both hands open because closing them would have hurt him. Andre put the fifth letter down and went to the bathroom and was sick. When he came back, he sat on the floor with his back against the bed, and he kept reading because Renee had kept writing, and the least he could do, the only thing he could do for her now, across all those years, was finish what she had started. The sixth letter was shorter. The medicine was failing, and she knew it. She wrote about small things, the way Marcus laughed at the cartoon with the duck, the way he had started saying mama to both of them, and how she had decided she would not correct him, because both of them were his mama now, and that was the truth and not a lie. She wrote, you will not remember me. That is the thing I cannot make peace with. You will remember her, and you should. She will have earned it 1,000 times over. But you will not remember the woman who carried you. And so I am putting myself in these pages so there is something to remember. I was here. I held you. I did not want to leave you. Remember that part. The rest you can let go. The seventh letter was the last one she finished. It was written to a 7-year-old, and Renee had not lived to a 7th birthday, so she had written it ahead, the way she had written several ahead in those final months, racing the clock, leaving a stack of years for a boy who would open them all at once when he was old enough. Andre understood that now the numbers ran to 11, but she had died somewhere around his 4th year on this earth, and she had written the rest in advance, gifts placed along a road she would not get to walk with him. In the 7th letter, she wrote about who she hoped he would be. I hope you are kind, she wrote. I hope you are the kind of man who notices the person nobody notices. I hope you do not have to be rich, but I hope you are never hungry. I hope when you love someone you tell them out loud and often, because I ran out of time to tell people things, and I do not want that for you. Happy birthday, my Marcus, my Andre, my son by every name. Wherever I am proud. The light in the bedroom had gone from gold to grey while he read his phone, had buzzed twice in his pocket. His wife, Tasha, wondering where he was. He did not answer it. He sat with the open letters around him on the floor like fallen leaves, and he understood, finally and completely, the shape of the gift he had been given and the size of the woman who had given it. Yolanda had never told him. Not once in 41 years, not when he was a boy and asked, the way boys do, where his daddy was, and she had said, your daddy is not part of our story, and that was all, and he had felt the door close and had never pushed it. Not when he was a teenager and angry at the whole world and had screamed at her once that she didn't understand him, that nobody did, and she had stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed and her eyes wet, and had said, very quietly, "I understand more than you will ever know," and he had thought she was just being a mother. Not at his wedding, when she had cried so hard during his vows that an usher had brought her a chair. Not when his first daughter was born and Yolanda had held the baby and looked at Andre over the small wrinkled face with an expression he had not been able to read, and now on the floor of her bedroom he could read it. She had been thinking of Renee. She had been keeping a promise she had made at a kitchen table to a dying girl, that the boy would have a clean story, and she had carried the real one alone for 36 years so that he would not have to carry it at all. He thought about every time he had been short with her, every missed Sunday, when he had a reason that seemed good and now seemed like nothing. Every phone call he had cut off because he was busy, every birthday of his own he had spent not thinking about her at all, the way children do, taking the mother as a fixed feature of the world, like weather, like the floor, like a thing that does not need thanking because it has always simply been there. He remembered the year he turned 30, and threw himself a party at a bar, and did not invite her because it was a bar, and how she had left a card in his truck, instead signed with a heart, and how he had read it once and lost it. He understood now that she had spent his every birthday remembering a different one, a hospital window, a small hand pressed to glass, a girl in a back pew running out of time. Every candle he had ever blown out, she had been counting in her head from another year entirely. And all that time she had been a woman who had taken in a sick stranger's baby and raised him as her own, and never once asked for credit, never once used the truth as leverage. Never once made him feel the weight she had quietly lifted off of him before he was old enough to know it was there. He had been short with her over cornmeal. He had let calls go to voicemail. She had given him a whole life with no wound in it, and he had given her sometimes the leftovers of a busy man's attention, and she had taken those leftovers and been grateful for them because that was who she was, because she had decided 40 years ago that loving him would cost her whatever it cost, and she would pay it without ever sending him the bill. The remaining letters, 8 through 11. He read last and slowest. They were the ones Renee had written furthest ahead, and they were the most painful because they were the most hopeful, full of guesses about a teenager she would never meet. She had imagined him at 14, surly and tall. She had imagined his first heartbreak and written him advice about it. She had imagined him at 18 and warned him gently not to do anything that would cost him his future for a single bad night. She had been wrong about everything and right about the only thing that mattered, which was that he would grow up loved. The last letter, the 11th, written to a boy turning 11 by a woman who had not seen 5, ended this way. By now you are old enough to read these. I asked Yolanda to give them to you when she felt you were ready, or to leave them where you would find them if she could not bring herself to hand them over, because I knew this might be too heavy a thing for her to do face to face, and I never wanted to make her choose between the promise and the truth. So if you are reading this and she is gone, then she kept her promise to the very end. And I need you to know what that cost her and what it was worth. She gave you a life without a wound in it. Not many mothers can give that. I gave you to her so she could. We did it together, the two of us. The one who carried you and the one who raised you. And you were never, for one single day, unloved by either of us. Happy birthday, my son. Go and be kind. That is all I ever wanted for you. That is all that was ever the point. Andre Mills sat on the floor of that small clean bedroom until full dark, and then he gathered the letters back into the soft-cornered box in their order, 1 through 11, with Renee's first note on top, and he held the box against his chest the way you hold the sleeping child. And at last, 3 weeks too late, and 36 years too late, and exactly on time, he wept. He did not tell Tasha that night. 1. He came home and ate the dinner. She had kept warm and answered her questions about the house in a voice that almost passed for normal, and she let it go because she had buried her own mother, and knew that grief did not always want to be talked at. He could not sleep, though. He lay in the dark with the box on the nightstand and his whole understanding of himself rearranging itself in his chest like furniture being moved in a room above him, and somewhere around 3 in the morning he made a decision. He was going to find out who Renee was, not just the name. The person. He had a mother he had never gotten to thank, and the only way left to thank her was to learn her, to carry her forward, to make her real in the world again instead of leaving her sealed in a shoebox in a drawer. He started where anyone starts, with the few hard facts the letters gave him. A first name, Renee. A church, because Yolanda had met her through the church and had gone to that same church her entire life. A rough date, the year Andre was born, which the letters and the math pinned down within a few months. A condition of the heart, enlarged and failing in a young woman with no money for the surgery that might have saved her. It was not much. Andre was a patient man, though, a man who had spent his working life as a foreman on job sites where you did not get to skip steps, where the wall did not go up until the foundation was right, and he applied that patience now to the foundation of himself. The church was still there. It had a new building and a young pastor, but in the back office, 3 afternoons a week, there was an old woman named Sister Pearl who had played the organ since before Andre was born and who still came in to count the offering and water the plants because she said, "Idle hands." Andre had known her his whole life as a fixture, a hat in the third pew, a pair of hands on the keys, and he had never once thought of her as a person who held the town's memory in her head like a ledger. He sat across the desk from her with the box in his lap, and he said the name. Just the name. Nay. And he watched her face change the way the surface of water changes when something moves underneath it. "Renee," she said, and she set down the pen she was holding. Renee Carter. Lord, I have not thought of that child in years. She looked past Andre at something a long way off. She was just a girl, she said. Just a baby having a baby, 17, 18, come up from down south all by herself with a little cardboard suitcase, and so sick and so sweet. She cleaned out at the motel on the highway, and she would still come Sunday morning looking like she hadn't slept and sing louder than anybody. Yolanda took to her like she was her own, used to bring her plates, used to drive her to the clinic when the dizziness got bad. Sister Pearl shook her head slowly. We knew that girl was not long for this world. You could see it on her, that grey, around the mouth. We just didn't talk about it the way you don't. Then Sister Pearl looked at Andre, really looked at his face, and at the age of him, and at the box in his lap with its blue-numbered corners showing. And Andre watched her arrive at the truth without his having to say one word of it. He watched her eyes fill. He watched her press a hand flat to her mouth, exactly the way he had pressed his. The same gesture across 40 years and a desk, as though grief had only the one shape and every hand that met it folded the same way. "You're him," she said, behind her fingers. "You're Renee's boy, Yolanda's boy." Her voice cracked clean in half. "Oh, child. Oh." She kept her word, didn't she? All these years. I used to wonder, in the early days, whether she'd ever tell you, and then the years went by and I figured she never would, and then I just plain forgot to wonder. Sister Pearl reached across the desk and took his hand in both of hers, the way the people at the funeral had, but this was different. This woman knew, and her grip said so. She never said a word. She said again like she could not get over it, like it was the most astonishing thing she had heard in 90 years of a long life full of astonishing things. That woman carried it her whole life, so you wouldn't have to. You understand what I'm telling you? She carried it so you could be light. It turned out a great many people had kept Yolanda's secret without ever being asked to, simply by forgetting, by moving away, by the ordinary erosion of a town's memory, by the kindness of people who decide some things are not theirs to bring up. Sister Pearl remembered, though, and over the following weeks, across cups of weak coffee in that back office, she gave Andre back his mother in pieces. The way you return something precious you have been keeping safe without knowing the owner would ever come for it. Renee Carter had come up from down south at 17, alone looking for work, and had found it cleaning rooms at a motel out by the highway, $11 a room turned over, beds stripped and remade, somebody else's mess wiped down hour after hour. She had been quick to laugh and quicker to help. Sister Pearl said, the first one to bring a casserole when somebody was sick, the kind of girl who gave away food she could not spare and waved off the thanks. She had gotten pregnant young by a man who left before the baby came, a man whose name Sister Pearl either never knew or had deliberately let go of, and she had been diagnosed with her failing heart in the same season she learned she was carrying a child, 2 pieces of news in one bad winter that would have broken a harder person. She had not broken. She had worked until she physically could not stand at the cart anymore. She had sat in the back pew so she could slip out when the dizziness came without making a scene. And when she finally could not care for her own son, she had not given him to the state, had not let him become a case number in a county office, passed hand to hand. She had chosen a mother for him with her own 2 hands. She had vetted Yolanda the way a careful person vets the one thing that matters most, watching her, testing her, learning her, and then she had handed over not just a baby, but a whole carefully constructed future in which that baby would never have to know how close he had come to having nothing at all. Andre learned that Renee was buried in the old cemetery on the east side in a section where the markers were small and flat, and some of them had sunk into the grass. It took him most of an afternoon to find her, walking the rows on his knees half the time, brushing dirt off stone after stone, and when he found it, his breath went out of him. The marker was small and cheap and crooked, set decades ago by people who had loved her and had nothing, and it said only her name and 2 years a span of 26. There were no flowers. There had not been flowers in a long time. Andre knelt in the grass in his work clothes, and he put his hand flat on the warm stone, the way a 1-year-old had once pressed his hand to a hospital window, and he told her out loud, in a cemetery empty of everyone but the 2 of them, that he had gotten her letters, that he had grown up exactly as kind as she had hoped, that he had a good wife and 2 daughters and a steady trade, that he had never once felt the wound she had worked so hard to spare him, and that he was so sorry it had taken him so long to come, and that he loved her, the woman who carried him, with everything the woman who raised him had taught him about how to love. He did not stop there. A man who builds things cannot leave a foundation exposed. Over the next year, working weekends and evenings the way he had worked his whole life, Andre did 3 things, quietly, the way both his mothers would have done them. The first was the stone. He had a new marker cut for Renee, good granite, level and true, and he had them carved below her name, the words she had ended every letter with, the words that had turned out to be the whole instruction for his life. Go and be kind. He had Yolanda's name added to a matching stone beside it, moved her there from across the cemetery so the 2 women who had mothered him would lie side by side, the one who carried him and the one who raised him, finally in the same ground, finally able to be thanked in the same place. He planted a small dogwood between them. It would take years to amount to anything. He did not mind. He had learned patience from a woman who wrote letters to a future she would not see. The second thing was the children. Andre had spent his life around young men on job sites who had come up the way he almost had. Boys handed off, boys who had carried the weight Renee had moved heaven and earth to lift off of him, boys with the wound. He could not stop noticing them now. He had walked past them for 20 years and seen labor. Now he saw the thing under the labor, the thing nobody had stitched into a quilt for them. So he started small, the only way real things start. He began mentoring 2 apprentices nobody else on the crew wanted, a kid named Dante, who had 2 felonies before he was old enough to drink, and a mouth that had gotten him fired off 3 sites, and a quieter one named Cole, who flinched when you raised your voice and never said why. Andre did for them in small ways what Yolanda had done for him. He showed up, he did not flinch, he did not ask for credit. When Dante came in late and braced for the chewing out, Andre handed him a coffee instead and put him on the saw, and something in the boy's face came loose that day that took a month more to fully open. When Cole's truck broke down for the 3rd time, Andre drove 40 minutes out of his way at 5 in the morning to get him, and did not make it a lecture and did not make it a favor either, just made it a Tuesday. One of them straightened out, got his license, and last Andre heard was running his own crew across the river and had a baby girl he was raising right. The other was still a work in progress, in and out, 2 steps up and 1 step back, which Andre also understood, because foundations take time, because the concrete does not care how badly you want it to cure, because you do not get to skip steps, and you do not get to quit on a thing just because it is slow. He had learned that from a woman who poured 40 years into a boy and never once stood up to take a bow. The third thing was the letters themselves. Andre's older daughter was turning 12 that year, and on the night before her birthday, he sat up at the kitchen table, the same kind of table, and he did the thing his mother Renee had done 37 years before. He wrote his daughter a letter. Not because he was dying, because Renee had taught him across the distance of all those years that the things you assume you will always have time to say are exactly the things to say now, out loud, and often while the saying still cost you nothing. He wrote down for his daughter who he was and where she came from, the whole story this time, the clean one and the true one, both. Because his daughters would not need a wound hidden from them the way he had. They would need a history they could stand on. He told them about the girl from down south who gave away food she could not spare. He told them about the church woman who had wanted a child her whole life and got one at the very end of someone else's. He told them they came from 2 women who had loved a boy so much they had built him a future out of nothing but their own hands and their own names, and that the only rent due on a gift like that was to pass it on. He sealed the letter, and he did not tape it, shut and untape it and retape it 11 times. He just set it by his daughter's plate for the morning, because he, unlike Renee, was going to get to watch her open it, and he had finally learned what a thing it was to be in the room. There is a photograph on the wall of Andre's house now in the hallway where you cannot miss it on the way to the kitchen. It is not a photograph of a person. No picture of Renee ever turned up. Not one. She had been too poor and too sick and too brief for anyone to have thought to take one, and that absence had grieved Andre for a while until he made his peace with it. The photograph on the wall is of the 2 stones side by side under the small dogwood, Yolanda and Renee, and the carved words you can just make out if you lean in. Go and be kind. His daughters know the whole story. They visit the stones on the women's birthdays, both of them, and they leave flowers now, so there are always flowers, so there will always be flowers, so that no child of that line ever again has to kneel in the grass and discover that the woman who carried them had lain unmarked and unvisited for half a lifetime. Andre is a grandfather now. The dogwood between the stones has grown tall enough to throw shade in the summer, and on warm Sunday afternoons he will sometimes drive out alone and sit on the bench he had set there, and he will talk to both of them, easy and unhurried. The way you talk to people, you are no longer afraid of losing, because you have understood at last that love does not end where a life does. He kept the shoebox. It sits on the top shelf of his closet, soft at the corners, the 11 letters in their order inside, and once in a while he takes it down and reads the last line of the last one, the one a dying girl wrote to a man she would never meet, and he says it back to her like a prayer and like a promise and like the only thank you that was ever big enough. Go and be kind. That is all I ever wanted for you. That is all that was ever the point. He found them all, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure they had not been written in vain. If you have ever discovered, too late to say it, how much someone quietly carried for you, then you already know what was in that box, and what it cost, and what it was worth. Stay a while, and let me tell you about another woman the world overlooked, and the long road her kindness travelled before it finally came home.